You're just joining us, this is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the political fallout of a shooting spree that has stunned all of France. A killer still on the loose after killing 3 young school children and a rabbi Monday in Toulouse. This police and ballistic experts show that it's the same weapon used to kill last week 4 French soldiers that are off duty in that southwestern region. With us to talk about it, Bernard Kanovich, in charge of dialogue with the Muslim community for the French Jewish umbrella group, the CRIF. Also with us, Régis Le Sommier of Paris Match magazine, France 24's Tony Todd, who's been following this story closely, Waddick Doyle, who chairs the Global Communications Department at the American University of Paris. And we can go right now for just a moment to our Vibeke Knoop-Rachling, the Paris correspondent for Norwegian daily Aftenposten, who cannot be with us on set because, well, she's covering the story. Thanks for being with us here in the France 24 debate. We were mentioning in part one of our discussion, Régis Le Sommier brought it up, the issue of that shooting spree in Norway. And generally, what would you say? How did the Norway's politicians react? Were they? Did they show solidarity with one another? Did they stoop to partisan politics, or did Norway's politicians as a whole maintain their dignity throughout that ordeal?
Oh, they maintained their dignity and they stood together completely. And the reaction was, I think, maybe unique when you compare with similar events in other countries, because the Norwegian Prime Minister immediately said that what was most important for Norway at that time was more democracy, more openness, and more tolerance.
And has that spirit endured?
Well, yes and no. Mainly yes, but very recently there has been a lot of discussion about some people from Ethiopia, because the Norwegian government has made an agreement with Ethiopia and are now sending back even children that came to Norway to get political asylum. And since that was denied, they are now thrown out of the country, and that makes a lot of trouble for the government.
All right, so the issue of identity politics rearing its head, and the issue of immigration once again. Vibeke, thanks for that, and thanks for joining us here in our discussion. Now, we should tell you, by the way, there is an important precedent to the shooting. You were mentioning how there is no French word in part one to mass murderer. But there was one incident that's high on everyone's mind. And that was in 2002, in March of that year. 1 month, same thing, before the election, presidential election year. 8 town councillors in the Paris suburb of Nanterre, the victim of a man with a grudge. Turns out he had a grudge against people in power. We weren't sure what happened at the outset. Law and order and crime were much higher on the agenda of that campaign back in 2002. And after the tragedy, the far right hammered home its message that not enough was being done to stop crime. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the far right candidate at the time, squeaked into the second round, eliminating the socialist Lionel Jospin. So the shooting in Nanterre, Régis Le Sommier, did have an impact on that presidential election.
That's true, but I don't know whether it was the question of the way Jospin, which was the socialist candidate, run his campaign. There was a lot of critical, that he didn't care or he didn't pay too much attention on what was going on, and nobody really in the polls, was able to actually decipher that there was going to be such a move towards Jean-Marie Le Pen to make it in the second round. But what I would like to say is that Richard Dern, because that was the name of the killer in Nanterre, the nature of his killing and what he did is slightly different than what we're facing this time, because he's and that's the difference between somebody who wants to kill everyone and actually to kill himself, like we've seen in Virginia Tech or Columbine, make an act of absolutely craziness in order to rise up. This time we have a guy that kills every 4 days, that first killed one guy, then killed 3 guys, then kills children. He seems to be going back to a place, reloading his weapon and making and have himself ready for the next round.
And it's also who he's targeting.
Yeah, of course. And it's because of that blur between, that motive of, it's actually hard to link. I mean, we can say, okay, he's a neo-Nazi, he's a guy that committed to killing minorities. That can be true, but it's not obvious. The fact of him killing parachutists, of him killing soldiers, and how can he? One of the soldiers didn't really look like a Muslim physically.
Didn't look North African.
What do you mean by that? What's a Muslim look like?
I'm
That's outrageous. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I can
North
make
African.
mistakes. Okay, North African. He didn't. He was rather pale, and it was very hard for to decipher. And we've been with his family, and we've talked to, and he didn't really look like one. So the guy must have had tips that it was, or was he targeting on purpose soldiers? We don't know. And he's coming back to his place, then moving to Toulouse, which is 50 kilometers from there, with apparently a different scooter, apparently, using the same weapon. So we have a different type of guy that, only a guy that, shows up at the Nanterre City Hall and shoots everybody. It's kind of different. We have a real determined killer this time, like we never had in France.
And the political atmosphere of the campaign is different. In the 2002 campaign, we were pushing an issue of insecurity, crime, and the failure of the security forces to do it. In this campaign, we've clearly seen the traditional conservative parties moving on an anti-Muslim agenda, trying to appeal Front National voters. Remarks about halal meat in canteens, particularly from the Minister of the Interior, have produced this atmosphere. And don't think you can make a link between the killings and that position. However, I do think that it'll be interesting to see what happens now. Either there's an opportunity to bring together an idea of a community that finally recognizes the fact that there are minorities in this country, in France, or we will lead to a situation of exploiting that more. It sort of depends also on who the killer is, if they find out who it is.
It does depend on who the killer is. I mean, we have no idea who he is or what his motives are, but it does bring the anti-foreigner focus of a lot of the pre-election rhetoric into focus. And this goes back some way, and it's not just Muslims, as you were saying. Back in July 2010, Sarkozy made a link between immigrants generally and delinquency. He went and launched a campaign against illegal Roma gypsy encampments that year. And the debate has gone in that direction ever since.
And we can hear an excerpt from what the French president had to say. It was in the summer of 2010, a fiery speech by Nicolas Sarkozy in the Alpine city of Grenoble, where he made that exact point.
We are suffering from 50 years of poorly regulated immigration that has resulted in a failure for integration. We are very proud of our way of integrating people, but maybe it's time to wake up, to see what it has created. It did work, but it no longer works.
Here's a couple of your remarks, by the way, on the France 24 Debate Facebook page on how the politicians have been handling all of this, and it refers to that statement. First of all, there's a statement here from Michael from Montreal. He says, the killing of the soldiers last week and the children yesterday must not be turned into a political issue, and I applaud President Sarkozy for not being a politician for a while. Daniel from Rehovot in Israel says, well, perhaps Sarkozy, Le Pen, and other extremists will finally realize what incitement to racism actually does to the world. Menarkanovich, complaining about immigrants and tying delinquency to immigration, is that playing with fire?
Yes, always. You know, problem of security is always a good theme in time of election. Everybody has pays attention for immigrants and for his job and for his security. It is usual theme. Israel is a particular country, not linked, not from white. Everybody said Netanyahu is a terrible white. It's not exactly. It is not very exact. But everybody scares about the others. Those we don't know his reaction, we don't know his community, his own community, we don't know exactly what he wants, what they want. I think, for instance, that yesterday night, what the students make, Jewish and Muslims together, is a very good thing.
This was explained to us.
Yes, it is the first time in France since 25 years.
They staged
for
a
the
silent march
first
in
time,
Paris.
yes,
Yeah.
and they were more than 10,000. It is a very, very important thing. If that could be been developed, and if the leaders could not too fast and not too much, I think that will be a very good capital for the suite.
What's your prediction on this, Régis Le Sommier? Do you think that this goodwill will now change the campaign tone for the better, tone it down, as it were?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope, and I think it did some good in terms of people maybe also toning down their rhetoric also, you know, and thinking carefully of what they are using. I can say, I mean, like my colleague said earlier on, that certainly for Sarkozy using, you know, a certain type of rhetoric, and, you know, and especially Claude Guéant as well.
The interior minister.
Yeah, the interior minister, because they of course, you know, they're playing, you know, they try to catch up with the National Front, or get a part of their electorate to get elected. I think that's going to make them think twice, probably, and for, you know, for maybe the general tone of the election, it might be a good thing. I mean, let's hope there's some good to come out of that.
I think François Bayrou hit it on the track, and François Bayrou, to be fair to it, is one of these people who's refused to go down the road.
Centrist candidate.
Centrist candidate for presidency at 15%. He's refused to go down to the route of secularism, a type of secularism that Esther Benbassa calls fundamentalist secularism, which often ignores the reality that people are minorities. And one of the problems in France is the failure to recognize minorities that comes out of that secularism, which can result in some terrible discrimination, which is never recognized. And the 2005 riots were evidence of that. And also the way that Sarkozy handled, the president of France, who was then the Minister of Interior, handled those riots and used words which suggested Islam without ever saying the words Islam, constantly stigmatizing, has also created part of this atmosphere, in my opinion.
All right, and we can see perhaps live images of the French president who is at Charles de Gaulle Airport, where the bodies of those 4 victims in Toulouse are being flown out to Israel, where they will be buried. Tony Todd, your thoughts on what's been a sort of a strange campaign? It was supposed to be all about the economy, but then it switched to a whole bunch of other things. What's going to happen now?
It was supposed to be all about the economy, yes. And I think a lot of people felt that with this debate about foreigners, immigrants, that it developed a weird kind of two-dimensional simplicity to it that was a little bit one-sided and became a bit of a one-issue election. I spoke with Eva Joly the other day.
This is the Green candidate.
This is the Green candidate. And one of the things that she said was that with all this focus on foreigners and immigration and being on sort of people's suspicions and suspicions that Sarkozy is playing a tit-for-tat game with the far right in order to win back conservative voters, a lot of the other issues are being forgotten. how we haven't heard that much about what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Syria, in the debate for the presidential election. A lot of the big international issues have just been left out, and there's been this focus on immigration. And I think a lot of people are hoping that what's happened in Toulouse will, A, make the politicians grow up a little bit in terms of how they view and how they talk about immigration issues, but also try to take a wider look at what's going on in the world.
Waddick Doyle, question for you. We're now in the era of the 24-hour news cycle, and who can get the best short soundbite out there, who shouts the loudest, often gets on TV. Presidential campaigns, are they more caustic than they were? If you look at your history back in the 19th century, there used to be brawls between candidates and duels.
I think they've got more secret dirty tricks than they used to have. They might have had more obvious fighting before, but I think they've become more subtle in the way they use rhetoric and soundbites. I think that out of this, one thing that Sarkozy is aiming to do is people have been saying, my local florist said, but he's not presidential. He's not like de Gaulle. He's not like Mitterrand. He's not presidential. This does give him the opportunity to be the president of his people and to appear more presidential. So I think that could be one effect of this, that people are not looking at it. The campaign itself has been rather insidious, I think, but not
people
not
on the
direct.
Sly getting messages across in a sophisticated manner.
Particularly Claude Guéant, bringing in subtly racist messages.
Final question, Bernard Kanovich, if they don't catch this killer soon, will that have a huge impact as well?
If they don't catch him soon, first we could be afraid, because he will surely shoot again. I don't know where and don't know against whom, but we had to be afraid. And after him, the things will not be the same. Everything changes because we don't speak about economic, we don't speak about chômage. That is the main problem of the French actually in this campaign.
And we'll see how it plays out now. I want to thank you, Bernard Kanovich, for joining us. I want to thank as well Tony Todd, Régis Le Sommier, Waddick Doyle. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Next, it's Business, and that's hosted by Marcus Carlson.